Jenna had just turned 32 when she made a significant decision in her life. She bought her first house. It was a quaint little place with a cozy backyard, ideal for her two dogs. This purchase was more than just a financial investment. It represented her declaration of independence, a symbolic way of asserting control over her own life. As the day of her housewarming approached, Jenna felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She meticulously planned every detail, aiming to create an atmosphere that balanced fun and formality, marking this momentous occasion in her life. Given the complicated dynamics of her family relationships, she decided to invite only her parents. When the day finally arrived, the afternoon buzzed with laughter and conversation as guests began to arrive. Jenna found herself in the middle of a discussion with her college friend Lisa, showing her renovation plans, when the doorbell rang again. Expecting a neighbor or a friend who might have been running late, Jenna opened the door with a welcoming smile. Instead, she was taken aback to see her mother standing there, accompanied by Carson and his daughter, Vanessa. Carson wore a grin, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Vanessa, on the other hand, surveyed Jenna's living room with an expression that suggested she'd just stepped into a thrift store. "Jenna, darling, hope you don't mind us bringing a little extra company," her mother chirped as she breezed past Jenna, not waiting for a response. Confusion and irritation washed over Jenna. "Mom, I thought it was just going to be us," she managed to say, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Oh, honey, I knew you wouldn't mind. Carson really wanted to see your place, and Vanessa's been excited to meet you," her mother gushed, oblivious to Jenna's carefully curated guest list. Jenna felt a sense of frustration building within her as she tried to push it down, hoping the day could still be enjoyable despite this unexpected turn. However, her hope quickly faded. Vanessa made a point of loudly critiquing Jenna's decor. "I would have chosen a different color here. This shade is so 2010, she said, eyeing the living room with disdain. Jenna's friends exchanged awkward glances, the room growing silent as her cheeks burned with a mix of embarrassment and anger. This was supposed to be her celebration, her moment, and she couldn't let Vanessa ruin it. Turning to face Vanessa, Jenna forced a tight smile. "Well, not all of us need to follow the latest trends to feel good about our homes. Some of us prefer something more timeless," she replied, her tone sharper than she intended. But Vanessa didn't back down. "Why would anyone arrange a living room like this? It's almost like she's never heard of interior design," Vanessa quipped, and that was it. Jenna couldn't hold back anymore. She marched over to Vanessa, feeling the tension in the room rise. "You know, Vanessa, if you have suggestions, I'm all ears," Jenna said, her voice calm but firm. "But maybe you could share them without insulting my choices in front of my guests." Vanessa blinked in surprise, then scoffed. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. No need to be so sensitive." The supportive looks from her friends indicated that they weren't thinking anything of the sort, but the moment had grown too heated. Just when Jenna thought things might cool down, her mother pulled her aside, her face tense with anxiety. "Jenna, could we talk privately?" she asked softly, leading Jenna away from the party. In the hallway, her mother dropped a bombshell. "Honey, I know it's a lot to ask, but could Vanessa stay with you for a while? Just until they sort out their living situation." Jenna felt as if she had been punched in the gut. "Mom, I can't. This is my space. And after tonight, it's clear Vanessa and I aren't exactly compatible," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Her mother's expression fell. "Jenna, she's struggling. You know how tough Carson can be on her. It would only be for a little while." The weight of her mother's expectations pressed down on Jenna, reminiscent of past times when her mother tried to fix things by putting her in uncomfortable situations. But this time, she felt a surge of determination. "Mom, no. I need to set boundaries. I can't have her stay here, not after how she's behaved. I'm sorry, but that's my final answer." Jenna watched as hurt flickered in her mother's eyes, but she stood firm. As her mother walked away, shoulders slumped, Jenna felt a strange mix of triumph and dread. She had finally stood up for herself, but she knew this confrontation wasn't over. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, the house felt eerily quiet. The echoes of laughter were replaced by a stillness that settled heavily in the air. Jenna began to clean up, each simple task grounding her. Washing the dishes and sweeping the crumbs felt therapeutic, as if she were trying to clear away not only the physical mess, but also the emotional turmoil that had spilled over throughout the night. Later, lying in bed in the dark stillness of her home, Jenna replayed the evening in her mind. The memories of Vanessa's smug smirk, Carson's disapproving glare, and her mother's disappointment haunted her. These feelings clung to her, and as she stared at the ceiling, she knew she would need to confront not just the dynamics of her family, but also her own boundaries in the days to come. As I finally surrendered to sleep, my mind clung to the hope that perhaps the fallout from my recent decisions wouldn't be as devastating as I feared. However, deep down, I understood that this was merely the beginning, and that the consequences of my refusal to accept the situation would ripple far beyond my current understanding. The next morning began in a seemingly ordinary fashion. I brewed my coffee and scrolled through my emails while mentally preparing a to-do list for the day. But that normalcy shattered abruptly with the sound of a notification pinging from my phone. A security alert from my home system filled me with dread. Panic seized my chest as I viewed the live feed. Someone was at my house. My heart raced with an array of terrifying possibilities as I rushed home, desperate to comprehend the situation. When I arrived, I was confronted with a disconcerting sight. The locks had been changed. My key was now useless against the new mechanism. I felt a surge of anger and helplessness as I peered through the window. My blood boiled at the sight of Vanessa lounging casually on my sofa. A smug smile stretched across her face. "What are you doing in my house?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the stillness of the day. The door swung open to reveal Carson, grinning widely, his expression a mix of mockery and disdain. "Oh, Jenna, we thought we'd take you up on that offer to stay after all," he sneered, his voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "There was no offer, Carson. Get out of my house now," I snapped, hoping my commanding tone would pierce through his arrogance. Carson leaned against the doorframe, relaxed and unbothered, a stark contrast to the rising fury in my voice. Now, Jenna, let's not be hasty. You wouldn't want to upset your mother, would you? You know how she feels about the police." His words struck a nerve. Carson was well aware of how to manipulate the situation. He knew about my mother's deep-rooted fear of the police stemming from a traumatic incident in her past. Carson wielded that knowledge like a weapon, but I couldn't let it deter me. This was my home, my sanctuary. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police. You can't just break into someone's house and change the locks," I declared, my voice unwavering despite the trepidation swelling within me. I could see his smirk falter, uncertainty flickering across his face as I dialed. Within minutes, the distant sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as they approached. The police arrived swiftly, their demeanor professional and their questions precise. Carson and Vanessa attempted to twist the narrative in their favor, but their efforts fell flat against the unyielding reality of their actions. "I have every right to secure my property," Carson insisted, though his confidence began to wane under the officer's unimpressed gazes. "The locks were changed without permission, and you were not notified," one officer stated, taking notes in his book. The law was clear. Carson and Vanessa had no valid argument. The eviction process was quick. Carson and Vanessa were escorted out, their protests muted by the firm directives of the police. As I watched them leave, I felt a tumultuous mix of relief and sorrow. I was relieved to reclaim my home, yet I was sorrowful for the inevitable fallout this would cause with my mother. Once the police wrapped up their report, one officer lingered, concern etched on his face. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, though my heart felt heavy. "Yes, thank you. I didn't have a choice." He offered a sympathetic smile before departing. After the door clicked shut behind him, I stood in the quiet aftermath of the chaos. The house felt larger and emptier now, an overwhelming reminder of the violation I had just experienced. I wandered through each room, reaffirming my presence in the space that had almost been taken from me. The weight of the day pressed down on me, a stark reminder that the battles ahead were far from over. Carson and Vanessa might be gone, but their actions would surely ripple through my family, possibly leaving permanent scars. Despite the turmoil, a stubborn flame of defiance flickered within me. This was my home, and I would fight for it at any cost. The silence of the evening was abruptly broken by the sharp ring of my phone. My heart sank as I saw my mother's name flash on the screen. I braced myself for the inevitable conversation. "Mom," I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jenna," she began, her tone thick with emotion. "How could you do this to Carson and Vanessa after everything they've been through?" Her words cut deep, and I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Mom, they broke into my house. They changed my locks. What was I supposed to do? Just let them take over my home? You could have handled it differently, Jenna. You know how I feel about the police," she replied, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disappointment. The conversation unfolded with an intensity that I hadn't anticipated, the air thick with unspoken emotions. "I didn't have a choice," I said, frustration creeping into my voice as I attempted to articulate my position. "They left me no option." I felt the weight of my circumstances pressing down on me, forcing me to protect what I considered my home. After a long, heavy silence, my mother responded, her words carrying a painful gravity. "I can't believe this. I thought you understood, Jenna. I thought you cared more about your family." I felt a tightness in my chest. "I do care, Mom," I whispered, trying to convey the depth of my feelings. "But shouldn't my safety and my rights matter too? Why is it always about what I can do for others, never about what's right for me?" My emotions poured out, years of frustration and suppressed feelings igniting my words. Her response was filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "You just don't get it, do you?" Her voice cracked, revealing the emotional turmoil beneath her surface. "I can't support this. I can't be part of it." A sense of dread filled me. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I dreaded the answer. "I think it's better if we don't talk for a while. I need to think about all this." Her final words cut through me like a knife, leaving a silence that felt vast and suffocating. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor as the reality of her rejection sank in. My mother, my lifelong anchor, had cast me adrift over this issue. I sank into the couch, its soft fabric offering no comfort, as I stared out the window. The night stretched on endlessly, the contours of my home that once brought me solace now feeling alien and reshaped by the events of the day. Thoughts swirled in my mind, tangled up in concepts of family loyalty, manipulation, and the personal cost of standing up for myself. I questioned whether there had been another way to handle the situation, a path that wouldn't have led to this painful rift. As the night wore on, I wrestled with these heavy questions. I realized manipulation wasn't just about coercion. It involved making someone feel guilty for holding their ground. Carson had used my mother's fears to control me, and now, unintentionally, my mother was doing the same through her disappointment. By dawn, a quiet resolve began to settle over me. I understood that protecting my emotional and psychological well-being was just as crucial as defending my physical space. The rift with my mother, while painful, was necessary for my growth. In the stillness of early morning, I recognized that, although the battle for my home felt like it ended, the journey to reclaim my life was just beginning. As days turned into weeks, the sting of my mother's words transformed into a persistent ache, a constant reminder of the price of my newfound autonomy. Her silence was deafening, yet with each passing day, I unearthed pieces of myself I hadn't realized I had lost in the fray of family obligations. My home, once a battleground filled with conflict and strife, began to transform back into the sanctuary I had envisioned. I repainted the living room, each stroke of the brush erasing remnants of Vanessa's scornful remarks. With every color change, I reclaimed my space. New locks were installed, stronger and more secure, clicking reassuringly under my fingers, symbolizing the boundaries I was learning to set for myself. In the solitude of my reclaimed home, I discovered a resilience I hadn't given myself credit for. Friends and neighbors, aware of the ordeal I had faced, rallied around me. Their support helped to soothe the isolation left by my family's absence. Dinners, movie nights, and long walks with those who chose to stand by my side filled my days, reminding me that family is not solely about blood ties, but about who supports you when the ground falls away beneath you. As for Carson and Vanessa, their fate became a distant murmur. Their paths diverged from mine following their eviction, and occasional whispers of their struggles reached me through mutual acquaintances, but they no longer influenced my emotions. My focus shifted to rebuilding and fortifying the life I chose, rather than the one imposed upon me. One crisp morning, as I stood in my garden, planting seeds that would eventually bloom into vibrant flowers, I realized that this was what true independence felt like. It was not merely the absence of conflict, but rather the presence of peace in the aftermath. The estrangement from my mother was a deep scar, one that might never fully heal. But it also stood as a testament to the lengths I would go to protect my peace. The journey towards self-empowerment is often solitary, fraught with tough decisions and painful reckonings. Yet, as I looked around my home, the space I fought to protect, I understood that it was worth it. Here, in my own space, I was free to live life on my terms, surrounded by those who respected and supported my boundaries. This wasn't just a house. It was my declaration of independence.